Good morning, everyone. We're just going to give the group another minute or two to sign on and then we'll get started with the webinar. Thank you. Good morning again, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. I'm Mark Lamandola, the moderator, and I will be assisting my colleague and today's presenter, Kate Winnebeck. Kate is a senior project manager for the New York State Pollution Prevention Institute. Kate is a certified life cycle assessment professional who works with businesses to understand their goals, ensuring the most appropriate approach is utilized. She also focuses on performing green product assessments, including the evaluation of the product's environmental attributes, recyclability, and human health effects. Before we get started today, I just want to cover a few logistical items with the group. First, a recorded version of this webinar will be sent to everyone who is registered immediately following today's session. This webinar is expected to last for approximately 30 minutes, and we've left about 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. Please use the chat feature or the questions feature to ask any questions throughout the webinar. If we're unable to answer all the questions, we'll make sure to send out an email following the webinar to make sure that all of your questions are answered. Before I turn the webinar over to Kate, I just want to provide the group with a brief overview about our organization. We're located at the Rochester Institute of Technology, which is a Polytech university located just outside the city of Rochester. For the last 10 years, RIT has led a program for the state of New York called the New York State Pollution Prevention Institute, or as we like to call it, P2I. P2I helps businesses and citizens with technical assistance to reduce waste, energy and water usage, and toxic substance use. Today's webinar is focused on life cycle assessments, which can provide clear, actionable insights that can inform successful sustainability programs. Now that you know a little bit about who we are, I'd like to turn the webinar over to Kate Winnebeck.
Thanks, Mark. So today, the goal really is to give everyone kind of an introduction to life cycle assessment. So we'll talk about what it is, we'll talk about how to use LCA to meet sustainability goals, what kind of results can we get out of LCA and what can we do with those results, and then lastly, how to get started. So when we talk about life cycle assessment, it's really a technique to quantify environmental impact of a product. And we do that straight from material acquisition all the way through end of life. So whether that is a material or product that goes to landfill, whether it's being reused, remanufactured, or recycled. We kind of include every step of that process. It's really a method to understand both how the environment is impacted and by how much it is impacted. So we're both qualifying and quantifying that impact. Another way to look at it is we have kind of the natural resource inputs. So what is everything kind of going in to each one of these life cycle stages or phases? And then we also quantify and qualify those emissions and waste outputs. So what's going in, what's coming out, and then we translate those to environmental impacts. So how's that impacting human health, the ecosystem, and natural resources? So when we think about LCA, a lot of times people think of this kind of all encompassing, very comprehensive, very time and resource intense process, which it can be. That's what we consider a comprehensive LCA. That's when we're looking at all life cycle stages. We're looking at a very thorough set of environmental impacts. But there's also kind of other types that might be used in other situations. We could do a streamlined analysis, a targeted analysis, where we're looking at either one or just a few life cycle stages, or maybe one or a few impacts. So, excuse me, things like a greenhouse gas analysis might be a streamlined analysis, something that only looks at kind of use phase energy of a product. We would consider that kind of a targeted analysis. So these are all different types of LCAs that we have and can perform, and they're used for different situations. So some of the benefits of LCA, ultimately, really, it's to quantify environmental benefits and validate product marketing claims. That's one of the main uses that we see of life cycle assessment, is folks want to make an environmental claim about their product. And really, this is a third-party, independent, scientific way to back up those claims. The results and even kind of the process are great to help guide strategic planning, priority setting, and also product design and redesign. We've done some work with clients, helping them with multiple iterations of a design and helping them choose kind of which is the best design to move forward. This is also used sometimes for industry to help with strategic planning, or to help with planning going forward. And then it also can be used to help select relevant indicators. So again, should you be focusing on energy, water, toxic, solid waste, etc.? What is the most relevant for your product or your product system? For example, if you're analyzing or we're assessing a product that has significant energy during use, then obviously energy is going to be very important. If it's something that uses a lot of water or has a lot of solid waste, are you focusing on the correct areas? Also, it helps to identify hotspots. So identifying those products, processes, or materials that contribute most to the environmental footprint. It's always interesting when we do any kind of life cycle assessment, there's always something that comes up that, wow, we weren't expecting that. We weren't expecting this material or this process to have such a significant impact. And we've seen situations where clients, and I'll go into that in some case studies, have been focusing kind of their efforts on one piece of their process where that's really a small contributor to their environmental footprint. They really need to kind of move in a different way and kind of change their research and development in a different way. And then we also find, excuse me, the LCA results can be helpful in meeting customer demands. Especially we find this with smaller companies. If you're trying to meet kind of sustainability demands of a larger company that you may supply to, then life cycle assessment can be very helpful and can help fill that knowledge gap. So I'm going to spend the rest of the time here today going through some case studies. I think that's the best way to really illustrate how life cycle assessment can be used, the different ways it can be used, the different ways we have seen the results being shared, and the different ways that it's been really impactful. So the first example I have here is from Welch Allyn, and they really wanted to, this initially was a marketing project. They really wanted to use the results in their marketing campaign. They wanted to quantify the benefits of their redesigned eco cuff. That's the cuff all the way on the right side over there. But it was very interesting because it turned into kind of this hotspot analysis, decision-making process throughout working with them. We started to understand where should they be focusing their energy on bettering the impact. You know, they were focused on assembly energy and focusing on looking at the energy it takes to make their product. Well, we realized that's not really the biggest impact. So let's focus on some other areas of higher impact for them. So this slide here shows some of the results we had for the Welch Allyn project. We had 3 blood pressure cuffs that we were comparing, and these are the types of results that we can get. So the bar chart on the left kind of shows energy demand, and it shows by life cycle stage. So here we see that materials are kind of the highest contribution to impact. So this also tells us that, you know, having any reduction in materials, if you can dematerialize, so actually reduce the mass of material, would be a significant impact for them. And this is where we saw, okay, assembly energy. Yes, there's some impact for assembly energy, but it's less significant than materials, packaging, and transportation for all 3 cuffs. So there are some other areas where they could make improvements. And in fact, they did make some improvements even while we were working on this project. They had some packaging improvements. And then the chart on the right shows the exact environmental impact category. So the way in which the environment is impacted by their cuffs. So you can see here it's fossil fuels, which was not that surprising for us because they're mostly plastics, which are made from fossil fuels. But then you can see kind of the other areas where the environment is impacted. And then, excuse me, I know that this is small, you won't be able to read it, but the intent really is to see how Welch Allyn has used our results in their marketing materials. So this sell sheet is right from Welch Allyn. You can find it on their website. And it really shows, you know, we impacted their raw materials. We validated that, yes, it uses less raw material. We looked at their manufacturing, validated it was a lower energy manufacturing process. For product disposal, we compared the impact of polypropylene materials to other cuffs. We also did some end-of-life scenario analysis for them. That's not shown here, but that was for their internal strategic planning, you know, showing what happens if you could recycle their product or what happens if it gets incinerated. So we did some of that for them. And then ultimately, kind of box number 4, the 60% less environmental impact than traditional disposable cuffs. I mean, that is really the crux of our life cycle assessment, was to get to that result. So this was a very successful project. It really helped them to instill life cycle thinking throughout their company as well. I mean, their designers now were thinking more strategically around life cycle and environmental impact. We had their packaging group involved. We had their manufacturing group involved. It was really a win-win all the way around. So the next example was for Staples, and this was to validate remanufacturing. So we're looking at comparing new and remanufactured toner cartridges. So we did a similar LCA. We did a very comprehensive comparative assertion LCA. So comparative assertion, so we're comparing a product to a competitor's product. So that's what we did here. You can see the results there, where you see the biggest kind of savings, the biggest environmental savings was in materials, which you might expect with remanufacturing. It also highlighted the importance of functional equivalence. Functional equivalence is ensuring that you're comparing apples to apples and not apples to oranges. You know, not comparing one ceramic mug to one ceramic mug to one paper cup, right? We know that a ceramic mug can be used multiple times, so let's make sure that we're comparing multiple uses to make sure that it's equivalent. And then here is how Staples is using those results on their website. as well. So I've highlighted or underlined here, the remanufactured process emits 60% fewer carbon equivalents than manufacturing a new cartridge. Again, that came directly from our report. And each reman toner cartridge helps save 2 quarts of oil. Both of those came directly from our report for them. The footnote there at the bottom of the page actually cites our report. So again, just to give an example of how the results are being used today in real world marketing scenarios. The next example was for Newpig. They're based in Pennsylvania, and this was the nexus of this is that it was a business-to-business customer. They had a customer who was very interested in their floor mats. They were also interested in achieving zero waste certification. So they needed some data from Newpig in order to validate that should this client, use their floor mats, that they would still be working towards their zero waste certification. So we did a comprehensive comparative assertion LCA for them as well. And in the end, they were able to expand their customer base. They were able to expand their market share. They gained this client, which was great. And they have been using it to educate their customers and making more informed purchasing decisions as well. The next example, this company uses waste glass to offset a portion of cement and concrete. So again, we did a comprehensive LCA here. You can see the results as well. So we looked at kind of ordinary Portland cement, and we compared that to municipal recycling facility glass. This company takes glass that's kind of left over from a municipal recycling facility that would otherwise go to landfill, and instead of landfilling it, they mix it with cement to make concrete. So kind of a cool company. So they were able, in the end, they're expanding their customer base using our results. Results have informed state and national glass recycling policies here in New York. They're very interested in glass recycling and what folks can be doing with glass. We kind of have this bigger picture result from this as well. We have reduced landfill volume. So now that we've kind of shown that yes, this is a great outlet for using this glass, it's better to use it in this material instead of sending it to landfill. So we can expect to have reduced landfill volume and more efficient building materials because of that. And the next example was looking at the impact of an air conditioning coil coating designed to increase energy efficiency. So initially they came to us wanting to validate some data, do a life cycle assessment for them for marketing. They wanted to use all the data in marketing. And we found in going through the process with them that they had some gaps in data collection. So ultimately the impact here was really looking at how can they improve data collection going forward. We developed a life cycle energy use and cost tool. So we developed a tool for them to focus their research and development efforts, something that they can use in their internal strategic planning, R&D efforts for a long time to help them focus the areas where they should be focusing to make sure they are working on the areas of highest impact. So this, for example, they were very focused on their coating. They really wanted to make sure that the materials in their coating were environmentally preferable. And we found that the coating itself is less than 1% of total impacts. So we were able to help kind of drive them and guide them to focusing on those areas that are the most impact. The next example is looking at we did a cost and environmental impact of a snow and ice management removal process, which is called SWIM by this company called WIT Advisors. And this was at 7 Syracuse area grocers. So we did this last winter. And really, this was a streamlined LCA. We focused on massive salt use and global warming potential. So we had 2 grocers that did not adopt their SWIM process and then 5 that did. So this was a real-time kind of comparison of how much salt was used within each stores, how many trips did they take to salt, how much energy did they use, etc. So the impact of results here, they've had an increase in client base. They've been able to share some of these results. It's been able to help them as well focus their data collection. They did a great job of collecting data. We kind of gave them a little push to collect some different data that might get them some different and better results so they could be even more energy efficient moving forward. And similarly with our hotspot analysis, we identified some additional opportunities for them that they weren't really thinking about and help them kind of tighten up their process. The end of this, our results found, the swim stores had a 50% reduction in salting trips. So they were actually going to salt less, which had a reduction in energy global warming potential of 7 to 71%, depending on the store. So really great results for them. And then the last example I will share was for a client that was really interested in some data for internal decision making that was triggered by customer demands for more environmentally preferable products. So this is a company that makes fiber drums, so kind of a glorified cardboard, for lack of a better term. And they were very interested in the scenario analysis. So we looked at their end of life and said, okay, what would your environmental impact look like if the drum went to landfill, if it was returned for reuse, if it was recycled and used to make future drums, or if it was recycled kind of externally and used to make other paper products. So the goal of this, again, was to support internal decision making, which it definitely did. And then we had some great hotspot analysis help them to focus on those high impact areas. I will also mention here, again, we did a very strong cost analysis for them. So we found that the recycling product system has 33% less environmental impact, but it had 40% increase in cost due to transportation. And then that really speaks to trade-offs and, getting into, is it worth it or not? And, that's really the company's decision to make and something that we can help guide with as well using those results. So those case studies, I will say, are not all encompassing. We have done some other LCA work for some other clients, including Wegmans, Bausch & Lomb. We've done some peer reviews as well for Kodak, Xerox, some other folks. So those are just kind of a selection of different types of studies that we've done. So how can we get started? So what we can do is we can definitely help you focus your goal and scope of a life cycle assessment. Very often do we get phone calls or emails saying, I'm interested in this, but tell me more, or I'm interested in getting these types of results, tell me how to get there. That's really what we are very good at, and that's kind of the niche that we fit here. Designing a study that meets your needs, making sure that you're getting what you need out of this. We can support, and we have supported product development, manufacturing, supply chain, by identifying those areas for environmental improvement. Again, ensuring that you're focusing on those areas that are of the highest environmental impact, and that you're focusing on the correct environmental impacts as well. And identifying opportunities for LCA to help increase market share and help meet those customer demands. That's what we're really focused on and what we can help out with. I know that this will be a question someone asked, so I will say we do have some funding available to offset potentially a significant portion of project costs. So I welcome you to get in touch with me. That's my direct line and email. You can feel free to get in touch if you have a specific project that you're interested in, or you just want to bounce ideas around. I'm welcome to discuss that. Please feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much, Kate. That was very insightful. Again, as a reminder, a recording of this webinar will be sent out once we're finished here. So it does look like a few questions did roll in during this webinar. The first question that came up was, what are the biggest challenges of completing an LCA?
Sure. So a big challenge and something we will ask for first off is data. Life cycle assessments are very data intense. So having availability of data on manufacturing operations, is really critical. You know, if we don't have the data, then there's not really a study there. We have to be able to have access to data and access in a timely fashion. That's kind of the biggest challenge and hurdle to get through. Yeah, I would say that's the biggest one.
Great, thank you, Kate. A second question that came in was, how do you know when you need to do a full LCA or a more targeted approach?
Sure. So typically you would do a full LCA if you're really wanting to use the results to market your product. So if you really want to be able to say, you know, my widget uses 50% less energy than my competitor's widget, then yes, you need to do a full-in comprehensive LCA. If you're really interested in scenario analysis, so maybe you're interested in like end of life options. You know, what if right now we're landfilling our product. What if we send it to recycling? Like, what does that really look like? How much impact are we saving here? What's the cost implications of that? Then that could be kind of a shorter, more streamlined analysis. The project we did for Welch Allyn was actually a packaging analysis. They had one product made in 2 different geographic locations, and for whatever reason, each of those locations had totally different packaging. So they wanted us to specifically look at the packaging materials and package manufacturing process and say, okay, which one should we go with? Should we go with one? Is one better than the other, or should we leave it out how it is? So that was an example of a streamlined assessment that we did for them. It really depends on the goal. You know, what is your ultimate goal here? Is this something that you're going to use internally to help you, or is it something that's more outward facing?
Okay, it looks like we had another question pop in. Do you provide any certifications with an LCA?
So all of our LCA work is done in accordance with the ISO 1440, 1444 standards. So when we do, for example, a comparative assertion LCA, so my example, if we're comparing your widget to someone else's widget, we follow the ISO standard, and then ISO requires kind of a peer review of that life cycle assessment. We coordinate that peer review, we get that peer review done for you as well. So while no certification exists for an LCA study, then that LCA, when you're done, you can say this is done in accordance with ISO 1440, 1444, which is kind of what is industry standard. We have begun to do some work with EPDs, environmental product declarations. So if you have a product that you want to comply with a product category rule and eventually obtain an environmental product declaration, we can also help with that. We've done LCAs in the past knowing that, okay, this LCA is going to be used or has the potential to be used for an EPD. So that is something we can do as well.
Great, thank you so much, Kate. And out of respect for everyone's time, we will, any questions that weren't answered, again, we will follow up via email to the entire group with those answers. Again, thank you everyone for attending today's webinar, and we will be following up with you. Thank you again.